Hi, my name is Jane Raffles, and with my husband Nigel we run Raffles Restaurants in Norwich, which is 4 independent restaurants situated in Norwich city centre. We've had St Benedict's restaurant for 21 years this week, which is a sort of French bistro luxe, as we like to call it, and no one knows what we mean by that, but it's a French brasserie with lots of influences from when my husband and I travelled around the world for a year and a half. It's our baby. I had it before the children, and we bought it in the recession in '91, and St Benedict's was incredibly quiet on the street, lots of closed businesses, and it was a labour of love. My sister made the curtains and the table mats. We bought pews and scrubbed them and stripped them down with horrible chemicals. We did everything in the restaurant to set it up with very, very small budgets, and quickly realised if we were going to have a successful business we had to keep our overheads really low, so that basically meant we did everything. We were very, very fortunate. 4 months into trading we had Emily Green, the food writer for The Independent, rock up on a Saturday lunchtime when I was incredibly busy and by myself, slightly running around in circles, and then my till decided to jam, so I ran downstairs and Nigel very kindly came up and gave this lady, we didn't know who she was, a huge glass of wine, the only glass on the shelf at the time that wasn't used, and consequently we got an amazing write-up about Nigel's sausages and the chaotic service. One of the big group of guests I had in at that lunchtime was a big punk band who were quite colourful, so it was quite an interesting service to walk into, but she absolutely loved it, and we had a full page in The Independent, which really set us on our way to running a quite successful business. A year down the line, the restaurant next door, Pinocchio's, just suddenly shut, and we loved Pinocchio's. We used to go there sort of half asleep on a Sunday on our days off, and we put in a sealed bid, and to our absolute amazement we ended up with a restaurant just before Christmas in '92. And we opened up very quickly, thinking, well, we'll get the place open. And the first night it was fantastic. The heating broke, and it was December, so it was jolly cold. And the extraction broke, so the whole restaurant was full of smoke. So, welcome to the restaurant world. But we managed to get all over that, put in a new kitchen, and spend quite a lot of money on the building. But we'd always looked at Pinocchio's. I remember coming to Norwich just before we moved here, and we walked down St Benedict's and we pressed our noses to Pinocchio's door and thought, oh, that is the restaurant we dream of. We've been looking for restaurants, and that was our dream, a restaurant just like Pinocchio's. And how bizarre, a year and a half later, we ended up with Pinocchio's restaurant. I mean, just incredible how these things happen. And St Benedict's is the most beautiful street. I absolutely love it. I love the diverse shops. And at one time it was full of antique shops and sort of all sorts of weird and wonderful things. But it still is, it's still got that incredible independent sector with art shops and music shops and restaurants. You know, I think it's a really unique street, and people visit Norwich and don't come to St Benedict's. I think they've missed out. Fast forward to 2004. In between that time I had 2 children, which obviously kept us rather busy. We'd looked at the site where Pulse is, which is in Guildhall Hill, just off Guildhall Hill, and it was a whole site at the time. It's the old fire station stables, and we talked to the planners. I remember meeting them on site about perhaps turning the building into a restaurant and a sort of nice bar, and there were actually stalls downstairs, and we said, well, obviously we could probably need to remove those. Oh no, that's really not possible, it's a listed building. So great site, but we walked away thinking, well, there's no way we could make a commercial business out of it. And about, I don't know, probably 4 or 5 months later, I'd gone to the original Rainbow to buy my bread, and there was a sign on the wall saying we're looking for someone to run a vegetarian restaurant, and it was the very same site but upstairs. So I went running back to St Benedict's. Nigel, gosh, you know, the site's come up again, how weird is that? Don't you think we should go for it? But it needs to be a vegetarian restaurant. I just do vegetarian food, is rubbish, you know, I can't do all that, that's too hardcore. And I said, no, just think about it and maybe write down some ideas, I think you'd be surprised. So we rang up the head lease people and spoke to them, and they said, well, the tender's about to close. We said, well, we really would like a chance to put our ideas forward, and they said, well, you've got 2 days. So in 2 days I managed to do a mood board. Nigel managed to write 2 A4 pieces of paper full of menu ideas, and we trotted off to see them, having made homemade focaccia with rosemary and sea salt, and turned up at this office in an industrial estate, and completely sold on my ideas. So consequently, 6 months later, we had a vegetarian restaurant. It was incredibly stressful, never opened a restaurant in the summer holidays because we'd ordered chairs from Italy, and of course Italy goes on holiday in July and August. So we were also on holiday in Greece, and we were on the beach in Greece trying to sort out transport of chairs from Italy when all the factories were closed. So that was rather interesting, but we managed to open. And people really loved it. I was just so proud because it's something I'm very keen on, vegetarian food. I mean, meat and fish. But people really embraced the idea, and I think the building, it's the hayloft, I presume, from the old fire station stables, and it's got such a unique, warm feel, and I think people just absolutely loved it. The only downside is it is tucked away in the courtyard, and I suppose if you weren't looking you could walk straight past. But with Rainbow being below us, obviously we get a lot of healthy minded people who perhaps shop in Rainbow and then come up to Pulse afterwards for a coffee and maybe a cake or a glass of organic wine, or a lovely salad. So we're absolutely delighted, and we do tend to attract a very Pacific crowd, as well as what I call normal people who just love good food. And I absolutely get such a thrill when I talk to customers up there and they're like, well, we love our meat and we're absolute carnivores, but we love Pulse. So I think we've cracked it, Pulse. So that was a really lovely thing, and I felt a bit more it was a bit more my baby than Nigel's, just because I was so passionate about the food. Fast forward to 2006, my husband had been told about an old subscription library coming up for lease, which happens to be adjoining Pulse, bizarrely. And off he trotted to go and look at this building, and came back so enthusiastic, even though it wasn't in a good state of repair and everything was pea green. But he could not stop talking about it, and in fact when I saw the building it does take your breath away. 1830 it was rebuilt after a fire. The story is that actually Pulse, where the fast station was situated, and the fire engine was pulled by horses at the time, they galloped round to put the fire out in the library, and the ladders weren't long enough. So rather strangely, because that happened again many years later, and now we've got the forum in its place. Anyway, the building was rebuilt. It cost, I think, £1,900 in the 1830s, and it was actually tailor-made as a library. So behind all the bookcases are heating pipes to keep the books from going mouldy. And we really haven't changed the actual fabric of the building at all, really. It's still got all the original bookcases, the incredible light fittings. We've just tried to maintain everything because it is so unique. And each time I take a customer or potential customer into the building, it really does have the wow factor. And in fact, every day when I go in there, I still can't believe that we've been lucky enough to look after the building and run it as a business. The concept came from my husband, the chef, the executive chef, who was wanting to do something in a very grand building and sort of dumb it down a bit so that it would be accessible and it would have a really lovely buzz and be full of people, which is exactly what we want all our restaurants to have. But because it was such a grand building, we thought that people might feel a bit uncomfortable, that it's very formal. So the idea of this wood grill was born, and a lot of research later, Nigel managed to import one from America. When we bought it, they said, Norfolk, Virginia. We're like, no, Norfolk, Norwich. So it had to come rather a long way. It's huge, great big steel affair. And every morning we buy local fruit wood once a week, and it's stoked and set alight, and it incredibly hot temperature. And your meat, fish and vegetables are cooked on this massive wooden grill, which, I mean, it's an indoor barbecue, basically, but it gives fantastic flavour to the food, and quite unique, nothing like it in Norwich. And we do all sorts of amazing events. We've had countless events, from a burlesque evening, funerals, weddings, bar mitzvahs, corporate events, you name it, we can do it. And we've got the space and the facilities to hold practically anything. We had fire eaters on one day outside, but we've just had incredible events there. And it's a building we've given a lease of life to after a very sort of sad, empty 8 years. I think it was empty for. So I feel that we've done something really good for Norwich as well, and brought that part of Guildhall Hill alive again. And it is a truly stunning building. Anyone who hasn't seen it, it's the big green building with the big Doric columns and a beautiful courtyard. So yes, very, very proud of our latest creation. We are also considering one more restaurant. God knows why, it's worse than childbirth, opening restaurants, but we really do feel we've got one concept that we really would love to introduce to Norwich. And it's getting harder and harder with the big companies moving in and independents being squeezed out, but we are quite determined that we will still be here in 20 years' time, even though it might be our sons running it, but we will still have Raffles, so you can't get rid of us yet. So watch this space for something coming up in the next couple of years, hopefully. Raffles Restaurants. Raffles Restaurants, what does it mean? Well, it means to us it's our lifestyle, it's our life. We are passionate about food, wine, people getting together, having a good time. If it's not in our restaurants, it'll probably be at home. It's very usual for us to have 24 plus for lunch on a Sunday. It's something that is a complete way of life. It's a bonkers life because there's always something going on within the catering world, but it's also a business. I mean, I think a lot of people forget it is a business, and it's incredibly, there's no science, but there's so many things you need to get right to run successful businesses and restaurants. And a lot of people get carried away with the passion about food, and we speak to lots of people who say, oh, when I retire, I'd love to open a restaurant or run a pub. Don't do it without coming to see us first, please, because it's one of the hardest things. There's too many pieces of the puzzle to get right, and lots of people fail, sadly. But luckily we found a way of a little bit of magic and a little bit of luck, I think, and a lot of hard work. I mean, where we've got to now is just through slog, real hard slog, and picking up the pieces when it all goes horribly wrong, and somehow having some black humour that whatever happens, there's always something either good that comes out of it, or we can laugh afterwards, and that's probably what's kept us going for 21 years. But yes, if you all come, or anyone that comes to Raffles, hopefully you get that feeling of passion that runs throughout our business, through our staff. We're doing lots of training on our core values at the moment, which has been very interesting, and it's something that the staff have taken on board, and they really love to hear the history of our business, which we're always terribly embarrassed about. We sort of didn't ever talk about what we've done, but they love it, and they've really bought into the values, and this is what we're concentrating on. And I'm doing a huge amount of work every week with all my managers, which then goes down to the staff and the values of our business. And it's been very enlightening and very encouraging with some of the training that we've put in place, that people are really buying into Raffles, which sounds very corporate, but it's not, because we couldn't be corporate. We're not organised enough to be corporate. But it really has made a big difference in pulling everyone together. We've got 50 staff now, full-time and part-time, so we're not really a small company. But we honestly, every morning we wake up, we actually do love what we do, which I think a lot of people spend their whole lives looking for that moment where they're going to love their jobs, and we're very, very fortunate. And Norwich has been very kind to us. You know, we live in the most beautiful county, in the most beautiful city, full of independents. Don't get me on the independent, because I will never stop. But thank you very much.